Hi, I'm Seán Duggan, and welcome to TheFIX, a podcast about Lightroom, Photoshop, post-processing, and all the things that we do with our images after the shoot. This episode is a bit of a follow-up to a show that I did 2 weeks ago with Erika Thornes, and I'm going to be taking a look at how you can get your pictures out of Lightroom using the export dialog. Now, this can apply to whether you're just exporting a handful of pictures or larger batches of images. I'll also show you how to streamline the process using export presets. So stay with us as we explore Lightroom Export Essentials. Hey, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. So, the topic of the show, Lightroom Export Essentials, was suggested by some of the conversations that I had with Erika Thornes in episode 48, which was published 2 weeks ago. And the topic for that show was your digital photo afterlife, preserving important family photos after you're gone. Or more accurately, ensuring that your family has easy access to the important family photos after you're gone. So, that they don't have to understand Lightroom or know how to navigate a Lightroom catalog in order to go in and find those important family photos that are precious to them. It was a great show, and if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch it. It really is something that probably all of us should give a lot more thought to, because it's just so easy to go along in our daily lives, and we, are shooting new photos every day or every week or whatever, adding them to our Lightroom catalog. And of course, we know how to access them. But if we're not there to access them, would our family be able to find those important family photos? So that's the key about that. Anyway, good show. Take a look if you haven't watched it. So as part of the suggested workflow that Erika talked about in that show, she mentioned taking, the best family photos from a shoot and exporting them to either another folder on your computer that's clearly marked, important family photos, or maybe even to another hard drive. But getting them out of your Lightroom catalog so that your family doesn't have to deal with Lightroom to look at them. And so as part of what her suggestion was, because she said that, it has to be easy. It has to be something you can do with a couple of clicks. Otherwise, it's going to become too much of a hassle and you're going to fall behind on it and eventually, stop doing it or forget to do it. So as part of her suggestion, she said to create a Lightroom export preset. So, every time you, let's say, did an important shoot of a family event, whether it's a vacation or one of your kids' birthdays or whatever, you would go through and pick, the very best of the photos. Not all of them, just the very best photos. So maybe out of a group of, 30, 40 pictures, maybe you pick 5 to 10 or whatever, just the very best photos. And you would export those as full-size JPEGs. Full-size meaning they're not sized down or anything, just the size that they came out of the camera. Export those as high-quality JPEGs, place them in another folder on your computer or maybe another drive, and that is just the folder that contains all the important family photos. That way, they can be easily found and accessed without any special software. You don't need Lightroom to access those. You don't need any special program. JPEG's a pretty common image format, and we're proceeding on the assumption that it's going to be around for a while. So we didn't have time to go in and talk about the export dialog and all of the various settings in that show, so that is what I'm going to do on this show here. Now, of course, understanding the export dialog has application beyond just that kind of more narrow topic of preserving family photos so your family can easily get to them. Obviously, you can use it for many different situations. And if you are a seasoned Lightroom user, you're probably already quite familiar with the export dialog. But if you are a new Lightroom user, my hope is that you'll be able to get some useful information out of this episode that will illuminate your understanding of the Lightroom export dialog and how to use it. So, without further ado, let's dive into Lightroom and check it out. So for this demo, I have a handful of black and white images to work with. that were taken last August in Maine when I was there teaching a workshop called Creative Seeing, Refining Your Photographic Vision. And on that note, let me just mention that I'll be teaching that same workshop again this coming August, and that is going to be August 7th through August 13th. Again, that's at the Maine Media Workshops. Great place to get away from it all and concentrate for a week of photographic indulgence centered on improving your creativity and taking your photography and your digital post-processing technique up a few notches. Really great people there in Maine. It's a wonderful place. I'll put a link to the workshop in the show notes. So in terms of exporting images, I have these in a collection just because it's easy to work with. You don't have to have your images in a collection if you're exporting them. You can certainly have them in a folder and work with them. But if you want to be exporting images that reside in a variety of different folders, then certainly having them all in one collection is going to make it easier to work with them at one time. So I'm just going to select a few of these images to export. I'm not going to export all of them. I'm going to click on the first one here, and then I'll hold down the Command key on Mac or the Control key on Windows and click on the other files here that I want to add to that selection. So holding down the Command key on Mac or the Control key on Windows as you click on additional thumbnails will add them to the selection. So I have 6 images selected here. I can come to the Export button down here in the bottom of the panel on the left-hand side. Or I can come up to the File menu and choose Export, and notice that there's also a number of other options there. So I can choose to export with Previous, which just means it's going to use the export settings that were used the last time I chose to export photos. I can choose to export with Preset, and notice that there is quite a lot of presets in here. These are all ones that I have created. I probably actually have too many in here. There's probably some that are duplicates and some that I created just for demo purposes. But this is a way to export images without having to go into the export dialog. I will be covering how to make presets here in just a moment. And secondly, I could choose to export these images here as a catalog if I wanted to. Right now, I'm just going to go into the export dialog, so I'll just choose export here. Shortcut for that is Shift-Command-E or Shift-Control-E on Windows. And in the export dialog, I am going to hold down the Command key, or that would be Control key on Windows, and click on one of the disclosure triangles here for the different sections. And what that does is it closes them all. So Command or Control clicking on them when they're closed will open them all, and then Command and Control clicking on them when they are closed, or rather when they're open, will close them all. This way it's going to allow us to kind of unclutter our vision of the export dialog here and go through them one by one. Before I do that, let's look over here on the left-hand side. You see we have a number of preset collections here that I've created. Now, if you've never created any export presets on your own, you'll probably only see this first one up here, the Lightroom presets. And I sometimes use these kind of as starter settings to create my own presets. Now notice up here that we have an export to hard drive option selected. If I was to choose this Lightroom preset here, burn full-size JPEGs, notice how the export location changes to a CD or a DVD. So if you are going to be modifying that, so let's say you like all the settings in here for exporting full-size JPEGs, you could then just choose this to hard drive, and it would use all the same settings, but it would export to a hard drive. So just be cognizant of what these are set to up here. These software-specific export locations are going to appear if you have installed any third-party software plugins that use the Lightroom Export dialog as a way to get the images from Lightroom over into the plugins. So I've got Aurora HDR Pro here and also some Nik software. So another thing about the export presets is that you can move them around after you've created them. So for instance, down here under SmugMug, I've got one that says full-size JPEGs for books, and I've got a book projects folder, but there's nothing in it. So maybe I accidentally saved this preset into the SmugMug folder when I created it. I can't really remember. So I can actually just take this and drag it up to the book projects folder, and then it goes in there, and that makes a lot more sense. You can also delete presets. So I've got a lot of presets here in my user presets folder, and some of these are probably duplicates or ones that maybe I created for previous demos. So I'm going to get rid of this one here that says for email 850 pixels. I'll just right click on that. It would be control clicking if you had a Mac with only a one button mouse. And I will just choose to delete and it'll get rid of that. So that's a nice way that you can just kind of clean up the list and get rid of old export presets that you're not using. Let's just close that there. And let's go in and look at these locations here. So you can go to a specific folder. You can choose a folder later, which it says is useful for presets, or you can use the same folder as where the original photo is stored. Now, if you choose a specific folder, it will always go into there. So just be aware that if it's set to that, every time you come into the export dialog, it's going to go to that same folder. I often use choose folder later, which is useful for presets, because that allows me to choose a folder on the fly. I might want to be using the same export settings that are contained in a preset, but I want the photos to go to another place, and so I can just create the folder on the fly. And if you choose this, choose folder later choice, you'll get to choose the folder when you click the export button. Then it'll pop up a window allowing you to navigate to the folder that you want to choose. If there are any existing files, it'll ask you what to do in terms of whether it should save them with a new name or overwrite them or just skip them. You can also choose to add them to the current Lightroom catalog if you want to. I've never really done this, typically because, I already have the images in my Lightroom catalog, and usually when I'm exporting them for a very specific purpose to send them off to somebody else. Either put them on a website or send off to a publisher or a place where I'm teaching workshops or something like that. I'm going to choose specific folder here for this one. And I'm going to uncheck this put in subfolder. I don't really need to have that checked now, but of course you might want to have that checked. If you do want to choose a specific folder and the correct folder is not highlighted, you need to come here and click the choose button and navigate out to that folder. Right now I have a specific folder chosen for family photos. So this is kind of continuing along on the same example theme that I referenced in the beginning of the show, which was that situation for exporting images as high quality JPEGs so your family can easily find them without having to understand Lightroom. So I'm going to leave that set that way to export to that specific folder. Under file naming, you can choose to not rename the files or rename them to a specific file name. I'm going to open up this menu. And I already have one that is selected here. It says Duggan Family Photos Name. And this is a preset that I have created, as are many of these in here. If you have never created any of your own naming presets, you're going to see a much shorter list of preset names here. But let's go into this and just kind of deconstruct how I made it. So I've chosen that there. And you can see that it is my name, the date, an image number, and then it says -fam for family. If I open up that menu again and choose edit, it brings up the file name template editor. And this shows me the different elements that are part of that file name. So let's actually just get rid of all that. I'll just highlight that and just press delete to get rid of that. And here's how I created that file name. I just typed my name, followed by an underscore, just to create kind of some visual separation. And then I chose the date down here from this date menu. So if I open up that, it has several different ways to specify the date, even down to the hour and minute and second, if that is important to the type of work you're doing. And I could see that maybe for some scientific purposes, it might be important. I'm just going to choose this date format here, this 6-digit YYMMDD format. And then I'll choose insert, and you can see that it puts that up there as a file name element, highlighted in blue there. And you can see a preview of our file name start to be created up here. Next, I'm going to place my cursor after that, type an underscore, and then I'm going to open up this top menu here for the image name section, and I'll choose file name number suffix. And I will choose to insert that. That inserts the original suffix number that was appended by the camera. So you can see that right up here in the original file name, that 5375. And it's just using the first photo in my selected group here as the example for that. Next, I'm going to type an underscore, and then I will just type the word fam for family. And now if I wanted to save that as a preset, I can open up this menu up here and come down here and choose to save the current settings as new preset. And I could give it a name here if I wanted to, and then just click create. I'm going to cancel because I already have that selected. And you can see that showing up here, Duggan Family Photos name. So I'll just click cancel here, but that is how you use this file name template editor. All right, let's move on to the next section, which is video. I don't have any videos in this section, but if I did have, I could choose whether or not to include them. I could specify what the video format is and what the quality is. We'll just skip over that. Under file settings, you can choose what the image file format is. If you choose original, it's going to essentially make a copy of the original file. In this case, this would be the original raw file, because these are raw files. When you do export in the original format, any Lightroom developed settings that you may have applied are going to be included in a separate XMP sidecar file that Lightroom will create and place in the same folder as the exported raw file. Now, if you are viewing this raw file in an Adobe application, such as Lightroom or maybe Photoshop, it will recognize those Lightroom developed settings because they are contained inside the XMP file. But if you are viewing the raw file in a program that does not understand the Adobe XMP format, then it's not going to show the file with those Lightroom develop module changes. You can also choose to export a file in the DNG format, and if you do that, the Lightroom developed settings will be included in the DNG format just because that file format has an architecture that supports adding in that information into the actual file format. And again, other Adobe applications that can understand that will be able to display the file correctly. I'm just going to leave that set to JPEG. For color space, I'm just going to leave that set to sRGB, which is fine for these exported family photos. And then the quality, I'm going to bring that down to maybe about 75 or something. And that's probably fine for this purpose. Of course, you could also choose to limit it to a certain file size if you wanted to here. Move on to the next group, image sizing. You can either choose to not resize it, or if you click that checkbox, you can resize it to a specific dimension, either in pixels, inches, or centimeters. Typically what I do, rather than specifying a precise width and height, is I'll just choose long edge and enter in a value for the long edge. So if I wanted to create a version for a website, I might say, well, let's make that 1500 pixels along the long edge, and we'll make it 72 pixels per inch in terms of the resolution. In this case, I'm not going to resize it because these are going to be full-size JPEGs I'm going to export for the Family Photos archive. Output sharpening, you can choose to sharpen for screen, matte paper, or glossy paper. And then for each one of these options, you can choose low, standard, or high. I'm going to leave that set to glossy paper, and maybe we'll sharpen it for low. If you want to get an idea of how much sharpening these settings are actually applying, what I would recommend is to export different versions of the same photo at each different setting, and then open them up and evaluate them at 100% or 1:1 screen resolution, just to sort of evaluate for yourself what the sharpening is doing to the image. And that way you can get a sense of how much sharpening you feel is appropriate based on your own personal aesthetic. In terms of metadata, you can choose a variety of options here for what metadata to include. Let me clarify here that if you chose copyright only or copyright and contact info only, that it would only apply that if you have previously applied such information to your files in Lightroom. So there are ways that you can create metadata templates to apply your copyright and contact info. I'm not going to go over that in this episode. Perhaps that'll be a topic for a future episode of Lightroom. Let's move on to the watermarking section. For this sort of scenario where I am exporting family photos to my Family Photos archive, I would not be watermarking them. But if you wanted to apply a watermark, you could choose that. And You can either do a simple copyright watermark, and again, that is only going to show up if you have previously applied copyright information to your file, or you can create and save a preset. Now, I have lots of presets here, probably too many. I could probably edit some of these out. And I've named these in terms of what the size is, where they appear in the image, and what the opacity is. So for instance, if I chose this one here, proportional, lower left, 740 OP, and then I come down to the Edit Watermarks choice down at the bottom, you can see it's showing up down here in the lower left. And I can change the size of this here by just changing the size. I can modify it. Maybe I don't want the WW on there, so I'll just come down in here and get rid of that. And I can change the opacity, make it more or less visible. I typically like mine to be pretty subtle and understated. Mainly it's there just to sort of provide a way for people to track the image back to me if they want to contact me about print sales or licensing or something like that. And I can change the placement of it down here by choosing the anchor and clicking down in the lower right button here. I can change the vertical and horizontal inset. That is how far in from the edges of the image it appears. Let's kind of bring that up a little bit more, maybe make it a size of 5. You have options here to apply a drop shadow to the text if you want to. And this is where you would choose the text color and the alignment, font, etc. You can either do the watermark style as text, which I have here, or as a graphic. And if you wanted to specify a specific image to use, like if you had an image that was a watermark of your logo or something, you could specify that here. So right now I'm going to leave that set to 5 for the size and maybe bring the opacity up to about 36 or something. Well, let's just make that 35. That's a little bit easier to specify. And then if you wanted to preview this, how this is going to look on the other images in your export selection, you can click on these arrows up here to see how that's going to look. Now, obviously, this watermark works best on images that are dark. If you had images that had really light areas in the lower right corner, it probably wouldn't work as well. So sometimes what I'll do is I will create 2 watermarks, one white and one black, at low opacities. And then when I'm exporting my images, I will kind of divide the images up into 2 different batches based on whether they are light or dark in the area where the watermark will be. Most of these images here are dark, so that would work pretty well for that. So to save that as a preset, I would just come up here to the menu in the upper left and come down and choose Save Current Settings as New Preset. And notice that I could also choose to update a preset. Right now, I'm just going to choose to save that as a new preset, and then I could give that a new name, and it would appear in the list. So I'll just click Cancel there because I'm not going to do that, and I'll just click Cancel here. But that's how you work with having Lightroom apply a watermark to your image and being able to preview and edit how it appears. I'm going to uncheck that because for this example of exporting family photos, I don't need to have that watermark turned on. Next, under post-processing, this is what happens after the export is done. I typically like to set mine to Show in Finder, which will just open up a Finder window and show me where the exported files are. Or you can see we can have it open in Photoshop and some other application, or I can apply an action, a Photoshop action to it as well. If you want to do that, you'd want to go to the Export Actions folder and specify what those actions are. Set that back to Show in Finder. All right, so let's say that I like the way that this is set up, but I now want to create a preset of this. So I would come over here to the preset column on the left and just choose Add. And then I would name that preset and place it in one of my export preset folders and click Create, and it would go there. Now I already have my family photos export preset created, so I'm not going to create a new one here. But let's say that you made a change to this. So let me come in here to the file settings, and let's just say that I want to change the quality, or maybe I'll change the size or the file name in something. I made some sort of change to this, after I'd created the preset. Now what I need to do is come over to the name of the preset here on the left, right-click, and choose Update with Current Settings. And that way, those new settings will be now part of that preset. So now that I am ready to go here, it is going to the specific location. I'll just click on the Export button and let it do its thing. You'll see a progress bar up in the upper left corner of the Lightroom interface, which tells you how far along in the export process it is. And here it's done. You can see it's now opened up the Finder window for the Family Photos folder, and there are the files I've just exported, along with some that I exported earlier. Click back on Lightroom here to return to that. So apropos integrating a Lightroom export preset into a workflow where you are exporting family photos to another folder, maybe another hard drive, where your family can easily have access to them without having to know Lightroom. The cool thing about the presets is that you can come to the File menu and choose Export with Preset, and then you can find that preset to use. So right here is my family photos group here, and there's the full-size JPEG family photos. The other thing you can do is right-click on one of the thumbnails that is selected, and if you have a Mac with a one-button mouse, you can access the same functionality by control-clicking, or just get a two-button mouse. They're really useful. But anyway, you can right-click on a thumbnail, and down here there's an option to choose Export, and again, here is access to all of your export presets. So that just makes it really easy, and apropos what Erika was talking about in terms of integrating this into your workflow so that it's easy to do, is that it only takes a couple of seconds to select the best photos from a certain shoot or family event and quickly export those out to the folder or hard drive that you have designated for, the family photos where the family can get to them without having to understand your Lightroom catalog. Well, I hope you found that exploration of the Lightroom export dialog and some of the essential settings to be found there to be useful, and I hope that you find that it's something that you can integrate into your own workflow. And remember, if you want to take a look at that episode that I referred to in this show, the one with Erika Thornes on setting up a workflow to deal with the prospect of your digital photo afterlife, how your family can access those important family photos after you're gone, that is episode 48 of TheFIX. Just 2 weeks ago it was published, but I will put a link to that in the show notes. So thanks for watching. Remember, you can always listen to the audio-only version of TheFIX on iTunes, or you can find the video version as well as the downloadable audio version on our website, thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX. I'm Seán Duggan. Thanks for watching. See you next time.